The landscape of contemporary celebrity culture is often defined by a stark and unforgiving dichotomy between the pristine public images manufactured by high-profile figures and the frequently turbulent realities that unfold behind closed doors. In an era where visibility is the ultimate currency, the mechanics of modern fame have transformed public relations into a non-stop battlefield, where every statement is calculated and every appearance is meticulously staged to project a specific narrative. Yet, despite the immense resources poured into managing these global brands, the cracks in the facade inevitably begin to show, drawing the public into an intricate web of fascination, skepticism, and intense scrutiny. It is within this complex arena of shifting allegiances and carefully curated identities that we find ourselves questioning the true motivations of those who command our attention on the global stage. As the mechanisms of traditional prestige continue to adapt to a highly digitalized world, the boundary between authentic advocacy and opportunistic self-promotion has become increasingly blurred, leaving audiences to decipher the true substance beneath the glossy surface of philanthropic endeavors and lifestyle empires. Before we dive deeper into the multi-layered developments that are currently sending shockwaves through the upper echelons of international society, take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an in-depth investigative update on the stories shaping our world today. The phenomenon of public fascination with the elite is far from a modern invention. Yet the current landscape presents a uniquely volatile mix of legacy status and aggressive commercialization. Observers from London to Los Angeles are increasingly pointing out that the very institution of global celebrity is undergoing a profound crisis of credibility, driven by a growing disconnect between high-minded rhetoric and verifiable action. When prominent individuals position themselves as the moral arbiters of the modern age, lecturing audiences on sustainability, ethics, and corporate responsibility, they inadvertently invite a level of microscopic examination that few can ultimately withstand. This dynamic is particularly evident when looking at the intersection of traditional aristocratic prestige and the raw transactional nature of American media culture, where past titles are frequently leveraged to secure lucrative commercial partnerships and establish lifestyle platforms. The resulting tension creates a fascinating spectacle for viewers worldwide, as the traditional rules of public decorum clash violently with the relentless demands of the modern 24-hour news cycle and the unforgiving court of public opinion. As we look across the Atlantic to the United States, a nation constantly redefined by its own cultural and social currents. The appetite for this ongoing drama remains insatiable. The American media apparatus possesses an unparalleled ability to amplify both the meteoric rise and the sudden, dramatic stumbles of public figures, turning nuanced personal transformations into highly polarized public debates. In recent months, the conversation surrounding the intersection of international status and corporate responsibility has taken an exceptionally sharp turn, with commentators and media professionals actively passing the long-term viability of brands that seem to rely entirely on controversy to remain relevant. The shifting dynamics of this media landscape mean that what was considered a minor public relations misstep a few years ago can now escalate into a defining institutional crisis overnight, especially when allegations of systemic misconduct begin to surface within organizations tightly linked to prominent names. This reality forces a profound re-examination of how authority is wielded and how global figures navigate the perilous waters of modern activism, where the line between genuine leadership and mere participation is constantly being redrawn by critics and supporters alike. Amidst these broader systemic shifts, specific individuals find themselves increasingly isolated in their defensive positions. attempting to maintain institutional credibility while the ground beneath them continues to shift. The public is no longer content with polished press releases or vague expressions of concern. There is a distinct and growing demand for absolute transparency and tangible accountability from those who occupy positions of immense privilege. This demand is amplified when the subjects in question have spent years positioning themselves as champions of progressive change and defenders of the marginalized, only to find their own associations entangled in deeply unsettling controversies. The contrast between public sermonizing and operational reality creates a powerful narrative engine that drives media coverage and fuels endless speculation among onlookers, who are eager to understand how these narratives will ultimately resolve themselves. It is a story of ambition, legacy, and the relentless pressure of a global audience that refuses to look away, setting the stage for a much larger exploration of accountability, institutional failure, and the complex nature of modern accountability that we will dissect thoroughly as this report continues. The shifting tides of public opinion have brought a series of severe structural crises directly to the doorstep of the modern philanthropic and aristocratic elite, transforming vague skepticism into a barrage of explicit, highly damaging allegations. At the very center of this brewing storm is the ongoing controversy surrounding Prince Harry and his deeply troubled relationship with the international conservation charity known as African Parks. For years, the organization was presented as a shining beacon of environmental stewardship and humanitarian care, a premium vehicle through which high-profile patrons could channel their influence to protect endangered wildlife and support vulnerable communities across the African continent. However, the pristine narrative carefully crafted by public relations experts has effectively disintegrated under the weight of persistent, horrifying allegations of systemic violence, rape, and egregious human rights abuses carried out by the charity's own armed rangers against the very indigenous populations they were tasked with protecting. These disturbing disclosures have not merely tarnished the institutional reputation of African Parks, they have sparked intense global fury and triggered urgent, widespread demands for Prince Harry to immediately step down from his governance role within the organization, as critics argue that his continued association provides an unearned veneer of legitimacy to an entity facing serious accusations of criminal misconduct. The roots of this institutional disaster trace back to an internal independent investigation initiated around 2025. Which explicitly confirmed that multiple rangers had engaged in deeply inappropriate and potentially criminal behavior on the ground. Despite this internal acknowledgement, African Parks has maintained an aggressive posture of operational secrecy, steadfastly refusing to publicly disclose the full extent of the criminal activities uncovered by their own investigators or to identify the specific leadership figures who may have enabled these abuses. This profound lack of transparency has supercharged the anger of human rights advocates and investigative journalists who point out that the current executive leadership has largely remained intact, completely insulated from the devastating consequences of the scandal. Compounding the public relations disaster is the revelation that Prince Harry, despite being fully aware of these ongoing human rights violations, recently chose to attend an exclusive, high-dollar fundraising event titled Conservation at Scale in Scottsdale, Arizona. This decision to actively participate in high society fundraising while indigenous communities continue to suffer has been widely condemned as a catastrophic error in judgment, illustrating a profound disconnect between the prince's public platform of progressive activism and his actual willingness to enforce meaningful corporate accountability. This pattern of operational failure and reputational toxicity is not an isolated incident for the Duke of Sussex, but rather part of a highly visible, recurring cycle that has seen him repeatedly alienate the very organizations he seeks to champion. A striking parallel can be found in his tumultuous relationship with Sentebale, the HIV charity he co-founded in Lesotho, which ultimately culminated in a bitter fallout and his formal resignation amid intense legal disputes and administrative recriminations. Legal documentation and corporate paperwork emerging from that separation reveal a devastating assessment of the prince's involvement, with organizers explicitly alleging that his increasingly toxic personal brand was actively damaging the charity's ability to secure vital funding and maintain essential international partnerships. The institutional pushback has extended significantly into his signature project, the Invictus Games, where an increasing number of military veterans and event participants are openly questioning what substantive value the prince actually contributes to the organization beyond mere symbolic posturing. These veterans are pointing out the glaring hypocrisy of an activist who launched Travelist, a corporate initiative designed to lecture the global public on minimizing their individual carbon footprints, while personally relying on a non-stop schedule of luxury private jets, creating an unsustainable narrative of elitist exceptionalism that continues to erode his global credibility as the scrutiny intensifies around the Duke of Sussex. An even darker and more profound institutional crisis continues to engulf another prominent member of the British royal family, ensuring that the cloud of scandal remains firmly fixed over the House of Windsor. Serious allegations have resurfaced with renewed vigour against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the Duke of York, driven by a series of explosive new disclosures from the personal assistant of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. These detailed accounts provide a chilling window into the inner workings of an elite international network, detailing specific instances where the disgraced royal was allegedly hosted under deeply compromised circumstances, effectively shattering any remaining attempts to minimize his historical involvement with Epstein's operation. The relentless flow of daily revelations has transformed what was once viewed as an isolated personal failure into a systemic crisis of institutional accountability, forcing a painful and public re-examination of how much the wider aristocratic establishment actually knew about these activities, and to what extent various family members and institutional authorities actively turned a blind eye to predatory behavior for decades. The ongoing legal and media fallout from these compounding scandals has sparked a profound wave of reflection regarding the immense sacrifices made by the victims who chose to confront these powerful structures directly. Prominent commentators and legal analysts are increasingly emphasizing the historic role played by Virginia Giuffre, whose immense personal bravery in going on absolute public record with her detailed allegations effectively forced the legal system to act against a sitting member of the royal family. In a landscape where countless other victims and witnesses have felt compelled to remain anonymous, as Jane does, hiding behind legal pseudonyms out of justifiable fear of institutional retaliation, Giuffre's public stand remains a monumental turning point in the modern history of accountability. The tragic reality of her absence from the ongoing legal discourse today only underscores the profound weight of the burden she carried alone for years, serving as a stark reminder of the immense human cost involved in challenging individuals who believe their inherited titles and immense wealth place them entirely above the rule of law. This atmosphere of perpetual scandal and perceived elitist detachment has fundamentally altered the way global audiences consume news regarding the extended royal family, turning every public appearance and commercial venture into a highly polarized cultural battleground. The public is no longer willing to accept vague corporate statements or tightly managed media opportunities as substitutes for genuine ethical clarity and operational integrity. Instead, every corporate partnership, charitable alignment, and public declaration is subjected to a level of forensic analysis that continuously exposes the deep-seated contradictions at the heart of modern celebrity activism, preparing the ground for an even more explosive examination of the commercial motives driving these high-profile figures as our comprehensive report moves into its final chapter. The ongoing degradation of the traditional royal brand cannot be fully evaluated without looking closely at the highly calculated commercial apparatus that has been established across the Atlantic, where the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, is actively attempting to launch and sustain her latest multi-million-dollar lifestyle venture. International commentators and royal experts have watched with growing cynicism as the promotional rollouts for her commercial platform, American Riviera Orchard, have become heavily dependent on the deliberate deployment of family imagery and personal narratives involving her young children, Archie and Lilibet. This calculated strategic shift has drawn fierce condemnation from cultural critics, who point out the glaring, unmistakable hypocrisy of a public figure who spent the previous week fronting a highly publicized advocacy campaign focused entirely on protecting children from the inherent dangers of digital media exposure and social media platforms. The immediate pivot to using pristine, staged photographs of her own children to drive commercial interest and maintain financial relevance has led to widespread public accusations that the Duchess is operating as a walking contradiction, leveraging her family life for corporate monetization while publicly sermonizing about the sanctity of child privacy. This profound gap between moral grandstanding and commercial execution has become the defining characteristic of the Sussex brand, drawing a sharp, permanent line of skepticism from audiences worldwide who feel that the couple has been thoroughly exposed as opportunistic, transactional activists. Critics are quick to point out that this pattern of behavior mirrors the absolute failure of their previous high-profile endeavors, which have consistently struggled to achieve long-term viability once the initial wave of sensationalism and media curiosity inevitably faded. There is an increasing global consensus that both individuals seem entirely detached from the realities experienced by ordinary citizens, moving from one highly lucrative corporate partnership to another, based entirely on whatever social trend or progressive cause happens to be commanding top dollar in the corporate marketplace at any given moment. This pay-for-play activism, as many prominent industry observers now openly describe it, has completely eroded their ethical authority, leaving the public to view them not as genuine agents of positive global change, but rather as highly sophisticated, self-interested grifters who are primarily invested in the perpetual inflation of their personal wealth and international media visibility. The broader cultural fallout from these compounding controversies is unfolding against a backdrop of historic institutional changes and highly unpredictable developments within the United States, further complicating the public narrative surrounding the intersection of status, power, and societal authority. As the global public watches the continuous erosion of traditional prestige, the focus has shifted naturally to the upcoming political and social transformations taking place on the American West Coast, where California finds itself at a historic turning point. In Los Angeles, the highly volatile mayoral race has seen an unprecedented surge of insurgent political energy, driven by reality television personality Spencer Pratt, who has managed to channel deep public frustration with systemic urban crises, the aftermath of devastating fires, and the perceived failures of established leadership into a competitive campaign that is challenging the traditional political status quo from the right. At the exact same time, the wider statewide landscape is experiencing its own dramatic realignment, with prominent figures like Steve Hilton generating significant political momentum as they tap into a widespread populist desire for absolute transparency, systematic institutional reform, and a decisive break from the established, detached political class that has historically dominated the region. THV11.com, this convergence of institutional scandals, commercial opportunism, and populist political transformations signals a profound, permanent shift in how the global public evaluates authority, legacy, and the true substance of modern leadership across all sectors of high society. The era of accepting polished public relations campaigns, inherited titles, and high-minded rhetorical declarations at face value has drawing to a definitive close, replaced by a hyper-vigilant and deeply cynical global audience that demands absolute operational transparency and verifiable ethical consistency. Whether examining the serious human rights allegations surrounding African parks, the historic legal reckoning facing the Duke of York, or the deeply compromised commercial endeavours of the Sussexes, the overarching lesson remains identical. Those who occupy positions of immense privilege can no longer insulate themselves from the consequences of their choices or the scrutiny of a connected world. As these diverse narratives continue to develop and collide on the international stage, they collectively illustrate a historic crisis of credibility that is fundamentally reshaping the boundaries of fame, activism, and accountability.